Um,
You asked
I
me why I said it was I said something at the beginning. I had a a long-time employee that I've spent a lot of time, energy, and effort training into a really important part of the company. They took a job with another company, and the other company I had in my building 2 weeks ago servicing my machines. And so I lost a great long-term employee. He was going to be an up-and-coming leadership person within my company. I lost today. And when that happens, after you put a lot of time into people, and it wasn't about the money. They thought that they think they want to travel 4 days a week and live in a hotel 4 days a week around the country.
okay.
And it broke my
Wait,
heart.
wait, wait, wait. That just happened today?
Yeah.
Oh,
So, you know, he said something, and I was like, I feel like I've been in night hell today. I mean, you know, that's kind of what happened. I got my teeth kicked.
uh,
No,
man.
I was, I was a little, I was a little bummed, and then I go, okay, well, everybody goes, oh, what are we going to do? I go, you know what we're going to do? We're going to adjust and smile and make a change. And every time this kind of stuff happens, it ends up working out for the positive. But it's one of those things, it's like, imagine you're a trucker and you, at a green light, you hit the gas pedal and you forget that you didn't close the back doors, and 2 million fucking golf balls roll out the back of the truck, and you go, oh, this is going to be such a pain in the ass. That's what it is. I got to go through and retrain somebody on a critical part of my company. So it was just a bummer. It was a bummer of a day.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I wasn't actually going to start the questions in this realm, but it seems like it's kind of leading that way.
Oh.
So I text.
What did I do now?
No. I texted you last night and asked, is there anything that you would prefer that I stay away from or don't bring up? And the immediate response was, nope, I'm an open book. And so I asked, okay, well, personally, I had a question, and you said, well, feel free to ask me during the live. So I was wondering, and I guess it's just, the community, the knife community is pretty small, and you hear all sorts of stories and BS and, this, that, and the other. What happened with Shane and Scorpion 6? I know that from what I've heard, he used to be employed by you.
Yeah. So Shane worked for me, I think, for 3 or 4 years. He learned how to make knives. He learned how to grind from me. I'm pretty sure maybe Joe and Colin and I trained him. I was still grinding when he was hired. And then he worked in assembly, and then he got hired as production manager. And he was a production manager for a while. And then when I headed to Europe for the IWA show in Nuremberg, I got an email that he had quit the day I left and had another company up and running. And he had kind of reached out to some vendors, and they had assumed he was representing my company. And he sounds like he let the ruse kind of go to his benefit. And then he went and worked with Dan at DSK Tactical for a while, and Dan learned to make knives with me also. Learned to grind. And then he went and learned to make knives with Dan. My take on it was that you got a right to leave, and you got a right to make a living, and you got a right to do what you want to do in this country, and you're free. His stuff looks like bad lines versions of my stuff. That's all. And then he took the bearing concept from DSK Tactical, Dan's lines. Dan makes knives, and he kind of got into bearing knives. And it's funny, Dan's been a friend of mine for years now, and when I started doing some bearing knives, I called him Dan. I said, hey man, you got any tricks? And he told me his thing, and then I was like, oh, I don't want to do it that way, and I do it my way. But it was kind of like a weird thing. So Dan, it was kind of like there was a little bit of a big brother or father-son relationship in a soft way, and then there's a moment when people break away where they feel like I think they feel shame inside about breaking away, and they have to vilify the other person a little bit. And so Dan had done that for a while, and we had like a falling out, and it really broke my heart because I knew him. And then Shane, who was my right-hand guy, but we were never really close, and his wife didn't like me. But he was my right-hand guy, and I trusted him. And the day I leave for Europe for 10 days, he quits, which just puts this like, you have no idea. You've got a burgeoning company, you're away for a third of a month, and your number one guy quits while you're on the airplane, like leaving. You get an email, and then you find out it's not like a fluke. There's a whole website and all of these models planned. So Dan's a knife lover. Shane jumps over to him, and then of course I call it Dan. I'm like, dude, what the fuck? And Dan's like, hey man, he's a brother. And I said, okay, that's cool. And they did their thing. And what happens is, time will either expose or promote you.
Right.
And then Shane, he did what he did, and like if you ask Dan about him, Dan is like, fuck that guy and piss on his grave, and his family's grave. Shane's hostile. I mean, Dan's pissed off about it. And I get it. And me, I'm not really hostile about it. I'm just very plain spoken about what happened. And, as a matter of fact, the year afterwards, Shane and his wife walked by my booth. And I was like, hey, Shane, how you doing? I wasn't like antagonistic or being a punk or anything. And they just like ignored me and walked straight by. So I walked over and tapped them on the shoulder. I'm like, hey, motherfucker, what are you fucking motherfucking me for? I was a fucking gentleman. What the fuck are you? You're going to stiff me? I was a fucking gentleman. I never gave you an ounce. I never gave him an ounce of grief. So I wish him and his family the best. I think he makes knives that are, I think they're his own style. In my opinion, when I look at him as a designer, I don't think they have mature lines. I don't think they have good engineering thinking. He's just artistically playing around with knives. Good for him. And does he make a good knife? He probably does. I've never actually held one, but he learned to make knives from me. He ought to be fucking decent at it. And Dan, after the incident with Shane went down, Dan reached out to me and like apologized, and we've been really tight ever since. I think he got a chance to see some perspective, and I'm a little older than Dan. I think he had a little maturing moment. And Dan and I are great friends, and I would never, gosh, I'm sorry, I started coughing. I would never want to take away from what Dan's done, making knives with DSK. I'm happy to contribute to the collective. I just think you could tell a lot about a man by the way he separates from his mentors and conducts himself as he breaks into his manhood. This guys, they're making their living and paying for their lives and their families off of the thing that I taught him how to do, that I just made up on my own and just figured out. Nobody taught me how to make knives. And I don't even care if they're grateful, but a tiny bit of humility would be nice.
Yeah, and I'm big on, it's not always what you do, it's sometimes it's just how you do it, so.
Here's the thing about me. I was in the martial arts business for years, and when your black belts break away to go start their own school, I've been through that. And how they conduct themselves is very telling about their father and about how they learn to be a man. So I remember many years ago, I'm very close to my very first karate instructor. I started training him in 1976. He lives a half mile from me on the same mountain. We could shoot a 45 at each other and hit each other's roofs. I have lunch with him, once a week. We're still great friends. And he says, and he had martial arts school for almost 50 years. His name is Dennis. And Dennis says, Greg, of all the guys who trained with me in all the years, you were the only one that didn't start a coup, start taking a bunch of students and motherfuck me to go start your own place. You're the only guy who did it right. I went to my teacher and I said, hey, I want to start my own thing. It's my time. Here's a map. Here's your school on the map. Draw a circle. Tell me where I need to be so that you and I can be best friends forever. And he just kind of looked at me with like a little bit of sad look and a smile. And I was like, I knew at that time I was doing it right. And I know guys are going to break away and do their own thing. And there's a devious, sneaky, shitty way to do it. And there's a grown-ass, handshake, look him in the eye way to do it. I just prefer the grown-ass man way.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't want to hide
my uncle is pretty much like my dad. He raised me when my parents passed away. But, he played pro baseball. He's a pastor now. And that's one of the lessons I learned from him early on. Because you know, in church, lots of times nowadays is like a business, and so you're gonna get turnover and people that leave. And that was one thing he has always been huge on, is if you're going to leave, there's a way to do it. You know, you don't, somebody that's poured into you and taught you and also, you know, basically given a part of themselves, so you don't just up and leave them and give them the bird on your way out the door. So,
you know, you could tell, you can't tell much about people when everything's going their way and it's their day in the sun. But you can tell a lot about people when it's not going their way. And, you know, Amy and I were married for 23 years. And when we decided to split, it was a big personal shame moment for me. Something that I've done in my life that I failed at. I didn't succeed. My marriage was ending. But you can tell that I picked a great woman to be married to. She conducted herself with class. I did. You know, it didn't mean every now and then under my breath I was annoyed to all hell, but we both conducted ourselves well. We're partners. She is connected to me forever because of our kids. And I have people who say the worst things about me, and I have heard, I mean, you can't find personal awful things about me. You just can't. I mean, people say I'm an asshole and I'm a racist. When you see people how they conduct themselves when they're at their roughest moments, that's the real them. That's the real people. And you know, that's what I see.